This is Gabriel Buelna coming to you from Northeast Los Angeles. Today, we're both on BuelnaNews and on YouTube, and Tacos and Law on YouTube. So we have an exciting guest today. We have the Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon. Welcome, Mr. District Attorney.
Thank you so much, Gabriel, and please call me George, and I'll
Okay.
call you Gabriel. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so this is tacos and law, and some people are like, why tacos and law? Well, you know what? In LA, first of all, I think there's the diversity of food and everything brings us down to tacos, and we want to make sure and be relatable kind of to our different communities. So we try and visit different taco places and make the law just very relatable to folks. But George, I have one, probably maybe the most important question, and we're going to get into law and politics and a lot of that fun stuff. Okay, but the most serious question of the day: where is your favorite taco place in LA?
Okay. All right. So I love street tacos. Okay. So I live in Long Beach, and we have some wonderful street vendors that have some great tacos. So I love street tacos. Sometimes in the restaurants they're okay, but there's something about street tacos. And I tell you, we have family in Mexico City, so we go to Mexico City regularly, and I love street tacos in Mexico City as well. So I would say this, street tacos are my favorite.
Pastor, asada, buche.
Pastor, if it's done right, in El Pincho, pastor, absolutely. Some people tell you it's pastor, not al pincho. I say, but if it's al pincho, you got me.
All right. And new vocabulary al pincho. I didn't know that, but I'm learning from you, George. So so we're always promoting.
That's when they put it right through the rod.
Okay.
Yeah.
I learned something today in our
All right.
multilingualism. So every time I introduce a new taco place in our different sessions, and today we went to Social Tacos in Eagle Rock on Colorado
Okay.
Boulevard.
Yeah.
And Fernando's going to show a shot of the different tacos that we have. And what's interesting about this taco place is that we have Korean tacos, Vietnamese tacos,
Oh,
carne asada, and and I'm going to try for our audience, and if you decide to come next time to the studio here, I'm going to try the Vietnamese one
you know
real quick.
what? I've never had Vietnamese tacos. I've had a lot of Korean tacos, so I would love to try the Vietnamese
Next
tacos.
time you're here, but I have to take a bite or else they're going to kill me here.
Go for it. Go for it.
Mm. That's the banh mi taco.
Wow.
We're gonna make a raw.
What kind of?
It has meat, vegetables, the tortilla de harina too, small tortilla de harina. Banh mi tacos, social tacos in Eagle Rock. Okay, but
All right.
we're not the advertising for social tacos, but just we're trying to be eclectic here. Okay, so
Mhm.
George, let's get into it. I want to go over three major themes, right, with you, because you're in a political battle for your life here. Am I correct? For your political life.
Well, I mean, yes, I think we're in a political battle for social justice. It's not just me. This is a lot bigger than me. You'll hear me talk. I'm very seldom do I say I, unless something went wrong, and I say I. All the good stuff I say we, because quite frankly, there is very little that I could do by myself. This is a community movement. This is a social movement, and we're in it together. We're a grassroots campaign. And, so it's so critical that LA doesn't go back to the days of mass incarceration and the days of lack of police accountability and putting kids into adult prisons. These are all things, the death penalty, that would impact our entire community. So I'm much more comfortable talking about we and our social justice movement.
But George, right now, just to because we have to be real with those watching and with voters, right? Because you need to convince 50% plus one voter to
Yep.
rehire you. Okay, so I want
Yep.
to go over first kind of who you are. I have a question for you, because I think you have a unique background. So you came at a young age from Cuba, correct?
Yes.
your father initially supported the Castro Revolution, correct?
Very,
Okay. I
very
know I
much
sound
so.
like
Yes.
I'm examining a witness, but I want to go with this. I know in other interviews you've done some of these questions, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in your family seems, but then they came to the United States. But could you could you explain, like, in listening to all those conversations, that as a young man in Cuba, then immigrating to the United States, growing up in Cudahy, where I believe the majority in Cudahy of the Latinos were Chicanos and Mexicanos. So
Right.
can you explain the base ideology? Remember, as a political scientist too, of your family, the discussions in Cuba, and then how that transformed coming to Cudahy, Chicano Mexican neighborhood, into who you are right now for the audience, just to learn who you are.
Sure. Sure. I mean, look. I mean, my father was an idealist. Okay. My father fought for the revolution. He was almost killed by the Batista regime. In fact, they thought he was dead and they left him behind. Luckily, he wasn't. But he also believed in a democratic form of government. And once he realized that what had occurred after the revolution was not leading to a democratic form of government, then he became, anti-revolution, if you will. And then he started to have problems with the local authorities, and that eventually led to us leaving the country. I had an uncle that was in prison for nearly 20 years. He was a union leader before communism. So real unions. Unions under communism become basically a political arm of the state. When we came here, as most Cuban Americans of his generation running away from communism, he became a Republican right away. Even way before he was a U.S. citizen and able to vote, he was already a Republican. And the conversations in my household during those times were really two pieces. Number one is we're going back to Cuba next year because the revolution is going to be overthrown. And number two was, we are Republicans, right? Because the Republicans, most of the time, uh, their values are closer related with the belief that communism was taking over and that we needed to be very hawkish as a country. And I'm talking about the U.S. now, to make sure that communism was pushed back. So I grew up in that environment. I grew up in that environment. When my parents became U.S. citizens, they immediately registered Republican. They voted a straight ticket Republican, quite frankly, for many years. I became a Republican for many years until I started to disagree with a lot of the things that were going on in the Republican Party. I was going to college when Jimmy Carter was running for president. I voted for Jimmy Carter, and I was still a Republican at that time. On registration, we voted for Jimmy Carter, and I continued to have sort of a hybrid approach to my politics, where I was still registered Republican, but I would not necessarily vote straight party, which drove my father crazy. And little by little, I convinced him occasionally to sort of maybe stray a little from that, but very seldom, frankly. My mother, on the other hand, was much more flexible, and I sort of became increasingly more distant from the Republican Party, and then eventually, I went to Arizona to be a chief of police, and that was sort of the parting of the waters for me with the Republican Party, the xenophobic environment, the anti-immigrant, the anti almost anything that had to do with people that look
George,
differently. Then, yeah,
but it was Sheriff Arpaio. I believe you went against some of his policies in Arizona.
yes, I did. I did. So as a result of my getting turned off by the sort of the anti-immigrant environment in Arizona and anti-Latino, which, by the way, there was really primarily Mexican Americans and Mexican. There were not a lot of Cubans in Arizona, and not really a lot of Central Americans at that time either. That led me to sort of start butting heads with Joe Arpaio, who was a sheriff of Maricopa County. He became sort of a national figure in the anti-immigrant movement at the time. We're talking now 2006, 7, 8. I wound up being asked by Congressman Grijaldo from Tulsa to provide sworn testimony at a congressional hearing, and I did that. And after that, I was asked to leave Mesa because I was bringing too much political heat, even though I had a lot of support from city council and the mayor, who were Republicans, by the way. So I did. But in that process, also, I campaigned aggressively for Barack Obama, both for the primaries and then the general. And then when I was asked to come back to California and become the chief of police in San Francisco, I registered independently. I initially registered no party affiliation, and then very quickly in 2010, 2011, I registered as a Democrat and have never looked back, and have worked in many, many Democratic causes, supported many Democratic candidates.
George,
and here I am.
Could you go into just very quickly, tell us about the district attorney's office, right? Because those watching, they may think, oh, the district attorney deals with the prosecutor's office, but in terms of understanding the DA's role in the justice system, for how many prosecutors do you have? How big are you? If you could just take a few seconds to describe for the audience
Sure.
what that is.
Yeah, so we're the largest local district attorney's office in the country. We have about 2,000 employees, about 750 prosecutors. Our role is multifold. Number one, the ideal role of us is really to be the guardians of justice, seekers of the truth, which implies that not only do we prosecute crimes that are brought over to us from police arrest, but we're also ensuring that the police is held accountable. There's a broader role that I believe that we have also, and we have done that. We go after waste theft, we go after environmental crimes, we go after consumer crimes. So we have expanded the way that we have done work. Not that that wasn't done before, but it was not being done at the level that we have. And so our role is basically to be the guardians of the criminal justice system and ensure that there's a fair application of the law, prosecuting cases, ensuring that we protect victims, that we protect communities, and that we hold ourselves accountable as well.
Most individuals who, as we're dealing with a democracy, because folks forget that the power of the district attorney, the power of the law, is based on citizens, right? The power comes from the people,
Right.
and that concept, I think a lot of us sometimes forget it, right? So 4 years ago, the public in Los Angeles said to Jackie Lacey, "We want to replace you," and you took over the position from Jackie Lacey, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So at that point, here we are 4 years later, and now you're asking the public to reelect you for another 4 years. Okay. The polls right now, or at least the polls that we've seen, show you a bit behind. Before we get into some of the things that you've done in the 4 years, and we want to get some introspection as well, where do you see the state of the race right now?
Look, I think the race is very tight, right? I think polls have been proven to be inaccurate. We saw the polls failing in 2016, not only the presidential election, but congressional elections. We saw the same problem in 2018, 2020. Increasingly, traditional polling is not accounting for these races where you have higher voter turnout. They may not be regular people that get polled traditionally. Also, because a lot of the polling is taking place online, it's almost a self-selected group. So increasingly, polling has become less and less accurate. So I tell people, the poll accounts as a one on election day. We were 17 points behind October 10th, October 15th of 2020, and we wound up with almost 54%. But having said that, there's no question the race is going to be very tight. We know that there is a lot of money from police, from real estate developers, Republican money coming in very aggressively to try to undermine my campaign, as there were 2 attempts to recall me. Over $10 million were spent during the last 4 years attempting to recall me. So we recognize that has had an impact on the local psychic. And even though that crime is generally down, during the pandemic, crime went up across the country, including our community. And I think it caused a tremendous amount of fear. And, I often tell people that while crime is mostly going down, fear is definitely up in our nation, and our community is no difference. And that makes this race very tight.
So you mentioned that, and I believe, maybe if I got it wrong, that your father, and I always go to family, and I always want to know where your ideology came from,
Yeah.
because it's a guide to tell me who you are and what's guiding you today. So when you
Yeah.
came in 4 years ago, what were some of those core? What were some of the policy changes and the ideology that came behind it? I know we're limited in time, so if you keep it
Yeah.
to 1 or 2 minutes.
Sure. Well, first of all, look, my father. I don't think my father could be a Republican today. You know, he died 11 years ago, and increasingly he was having problems. I think my dad would never be able to be a Republican today. But he was a man that believed in honesty and hard work and seeking the truth and fairness, and he believed in helping those that were in the greatest need, and that definitely has carried on with me. In 2020, when I was elected, and by the way, I have been doing this work. My goal was to show that we can reduce incarceration, that we can be fair, that we can start aggressively seeking to eliminate the racial biases that are in our system and still have a safe community. So that was sort of the guiding principle. And it really came so much from the values that both my mother and father had instilled in me about fairness, equity, treating everybody with respect.
But you have specific policy changes that you've made, for instance, on bail, death penalty. Can you talk about some of them?
Yeah.
Do you think you rolled them out a little too fast? Do you what would you have done differently? I think, as someone, because ultimately you're asking voters to rehire you. You're saying, give me another
Right.
4 years. There's nothing wrong with any elected official saying, I tried that, it didn't work, I'm trying this differently, and now I have experience, I want to do it differently. So give us that introspective from you, George Gascon.
Yeah. Look, I mean, first of all, the question that I ask myself is how many more cases of kids going to adult prison is enough? How many more people should be put on death row? How many wrongful convictions do we look the other way? How many bad police shootings do we look the other way? In my book, none, right? I don't think people are expendable. So therefore, the policies, the way that were rolled out, they were rolled out in a way that I believe it was necessary. And I came in without really having a management team. So I wanted to put exceptions to those rules, but I knew that going in, we could not put exceptions because the exceptions were going to swallow the rules because the people that were around me campaigned against what I was standing for, the reasons I was elected, and that was not going to work very well. Since then, we have put exceptions to these rules because now I have people that I can trust to review cases that are exceptional that require a different approach. So in the ideal world, I would have communicated some of that a little better. A lot of times also we forget that I came in right in the middle of COVID, where most of the people were working from home. This was even before vaccines. People were getting sick. I had over 600 employees that were sick. We had some of them lost family members. Courts were partially shut down, as you well know, Gabriel, because you're a practicing attorney. So communication probably could have been better. And I would probably be much better at communicating on a similar environment. Hopefully, that will never happen in our lifetime again, where we have to communicate basically almost always digitally. But that's an area that I think I didn't do as well. I think I could have done more with media. I also did not do that very well. So those are the areas that I worry, and certainly that I would do differently. Because I think as we communicate what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the impact of what we're doing is having, voters are very comfortable with that. But that was a deficiency in my initial year or so that actually carried through. The impact of that continued to haunt me all the way through today.
Let's go to retail theft. So sometimes I think when folks go into certain department stores and they have to ask permission from a clerk to get toothpaste, right?
Yeah,
That bothers a lot of folks. And
yeah,
or this morning I was in a meeting where folks where we had a break in at one of our colleges, and the individual was arrested. We got all the items back, and then they were let go immediately, right? So that's the frustration from some of the voters. So you have
yeah,
Proposition 36. Proposition 36 would allow felony charges and increased sentences for drug and theft crimes. So you, as in looking at a poll recently from the UC Berkeley, you have 73% of Latinos voting in the poll, voting yes on it, right? Voting yes on increasing 58% of whites, Black African Americans 37, and 53% of Asians. Tell me, why does it seem that Latinos are in support of Prop 36? What and are you conflicted because of that support?
No, look, I mean, I think that there's a lot to unpack here. So let me take the burglary of the school that you mentioned. First of all, let's take bail policy. I am against cash bail, but as you well know, being a practicing attorney, at the end of the day, the courts are the ones that determine bail, and LA County courts have determined that they are not going to seek cash bail for non-serious, non-violent crimes. And by the way, they are following the California Supreme Court case, the Humphrey case, which they are required to do so. So while I am against cash bail because I don't think how much money you have in the bank should determine whether you're going to go out and be free or not, it should be whether you're dangerous or not. The reality is that the bail policy is dictated by the court. Parking that aside, the issue of Prop 36 and the reason why I have so much concern with it is because I think that, often in our community, and by the way, when people talk about the Latino community, we forget that we're not homogenic, right? We have a lot of Republicans in our community. We have independents. We have moderate Democrats. We have conservative Democrats. We have progressive Democrats, right? So consequently, we're all over the spectrum here. And I think that the concept of mano dura is a concept that is very attractive to many Latinos, especially those that immigrated from places where there was a lot of lawlessness or, the police was corrupt. And we've seen that over and over again, right? So I think that so much of what that poll indicates is the misinformation that is floating around, because what Prop 36 is going to do, they're saying that, if you get caught with stealing under $950, okay, which is a misdemeanor now, if you get caught 3 times with that, you could be sent to state prison. And it talks about treatment for drug addiction. It talks about doing a lot of things, right? The issue of the aggregation and the ability to prosecute somebody for a felony, if they're a serial thief, even if it's a lower dollar amount, has been cured by the legislature. The governor signed a series of bills this year, which I supported and I sponsored some, that actually have taken care of that. We also went one step further, which Prop 36 doesn't do. And we said, for those digital retailers that are selling stolen property because they're not checking whether the person has the right to sell or not, which is phenomena that is not unique to LA County or California. By the way, this is happening nationwide because organized retail theft is impacting entire communities. Those retailers like Amazon now have the responsibility of ensuring that the person selling the merchandise has the right to that property. The other component of this that is often not spoken, but if you talk to our labor organizations, they would tell you that retailers increasingly have reduced their staffing levels working in the stores, and that has caused greater problems with retail theft. And that is a problem that, many of those retailers are going to self-checkouts. They're creating all kinds of mechanisms to avoid having employees on the floor, and that also contributes to that because we know there are models out there like Best Buy, like Costco, that do not have the same problems that other places have. But finally, here's what Prop 36 will do, and what I don't think our community understands. You get arrested with a small quantity of drugs. And look, I was a police officer for over 30 years. Okay, we used to stop a Latino young man with a Coke pipe that was empty. We scrape it, and if there was a little bit of residue of crack cocaine in it, and it tested positive, that's a felony that would go to prison. There were over 40,000 Black and brown men in prison for simple possession of drugs, not for sales. Prop 36 says, well, if you get caught 3 times, you could end up being in prison. Interestingly enough, we know that drug use in this country is across economic and racial and ethnic lines. But people that can afford to consume drugs inside their homes, their own backyards, they don't get arrested by the police. The people that are getting arrested are the poor people that live in housing developments that are on the street, the unhoused. So what Prop 36 is going to do is going to go back and take money away from rehabilitation because, by the way, they do not provide any money for rehabilitation. Prop 47, on the other hand, put between 80 and $100 million into community services. The state legislative analyst has indicated that money will go away. So Prop 36 is going to go back to the days where we incarcerate a lot of people, a lot of young Latinos, by the way, with felony convictions. That means that they cannot get employment. They're going to have a hard time getting an education. They're going to become unhoused. And we're going to go back to the failures of the war on drugs that have proven not to do anything to increase our safety or reduce the use of drugs in this country.
So just to be clear, you're a no on Prop 36.
I am absolutely a no.
Okay. To our final segment here in terms of what else, right? So you either have if you're successful, congratulations. If you're not successful, then you were going to move on to other things. But what I've asked folks in terms of knowing that I'm going to be interviewing you, they've asked, could you ask George Gascon, what are some policy reforms that are up and coming? If you get a chance at another 4 years, what will we see specifically? And then one final question.
We started a labor justice unit about a year and a half ago. We have now, people do not realize that the biggest theft crime in our county is wage theft. Over $1 billion, billion with a B, are stolen from workers in our county every year. By the way, the vast majority are immigrant, the vast majority are Latinos. And that money, when it doesn't get paid to the worker, not only is it taking money away from putting food on the table and paying the rent, but it's also taking money away from our entire system, because that means that some of the payroll taxes are not being paid. We know that workers' comp is not being paid. So there's a lot of issues there. It also forces the legitimate, the good employers that are trying to play by the rules to be undercut all the time by those that are willing to not pay their workers. We started this. We have recovered now back wages for about 350 employees. My goal is to continue to grow that. The other part of our work that I plan to continue to grow is our environmental work. We now have about 250 cases, including a case where we have Jordan Down High School, where lead levels on the football field, where mostly Black and brown kids have been playing for years, according to the EPA, was 75 times more than is safe for being around a human being. And by the way, and this is something I learned in this process, if you're exposed to high levels of lead, in addition to all the other problems you're going to have learning and many other problems, once it gets into your skeletal system, you go through three generations before that can be cleansed. So in other words, once you have it, it goes to your kids, it goes to your grandkids. That would not happen in affluent communities, but it's happening in our poor communities. I want to put more emphasis and put more resources there. The continuation of dealing with the issues of systemic racism will be there. We have prosecuted cases in the last 3.5 years at the same levels that we did for the last 10. We prosecuted over 100,000 violent and serious felonies. We have gone after organized retail theft aggressively. 92% of the cases the police has made an arrest, we prosecute. In fact, the LAPD would tell you that organized retail theft in the county is going down. It's not going down in some of the surrounding communities, some of the other counties. So we'll definitely continue to do the traditional work, but we also want to continue to expand those other parts, that, especially when it comes to the Latino community, the African-American community, wage theft, environmental justice, are critical to the well-being of future generations of Angelenos.
Finally, you've taken us through kind of a tour of your family, how they immigrated, moved, ideologically where your family is, and how you've evolved as an individual who was a registered Republican, police officer, and district attorney in different parts in Maricopa plus San Francisco. Whether you're successful or not, what do you believe is going to be your legacy in moving the needle forward in however you see that needle needs to be moved forward too?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that the legacy is already there, right? I think it's very hard. I mean, even a Republican opponent who we know that he's for mass incarceration, for the death penalty, we know that he would look the other way to police accountability. He's having to alter the way that he refers to some of the things, even if he doesn't really mean it. So we know that we have taken certain things away from the lexicon that it will be hard to bring back. also because there are so many laws that have evolved. When it comes to juvenile justice, for instance, it's very hard today to prosecute a juvenile as an adult. Initially, what my policy used to be is now what the state law is. So state law has actually caught on to. It's very hard to not take into consideration immigration consequences when you're prosecuting a case. The policies that I implemented very early on, they're now state law. We're pushing really hard to end the death penalty in the state. We're asking the governor to commute those that are left there. But it will be very hard to go back to the days of my predecessor, where she put 24 men of color in death row in a period of 8 years. So there are a lot of things that have been done that would be unlikely that they will completely roll back. The legacy, I believe, going forward is to continue to expand on this work, as well as continue to get better at holding people accountable. You know, we know that often it's very hard for the police to catch the people that are causing harm on a regular basis. You know, if you talk about property crimes, for instance, you know, police makes arrests only in about 15 to 20% of the time. That means that a lot of theft crimes go on unresolved. Police only solves about half of the homicides that occurred. We need to get much better at that, because that also will have a longer term impact in our community, as well as continuing to work on reentry programs that rehabilitate, as opposed to just simply punish people and bring them back to a place where they're going to go back and reoffend.
Individuals or voters and viewers, on November 5th, you have a decision. Today you've heard from our current Los Angeles County District Attorney, George Gascon. Mr. Gascon, we're going to invite your opposition. Hopefully he can answer some questions as well. Do you have anything that you would like to tell voters before the election? You have the final word.
Thank you. Well, look, if you believe that mass incarceration, the war on drugs, lack of police accountability, if you believe that that is okay, and that's a price to pay in your mind for safety, then I'm not the person you want to vote for. On the other hand, if you believe that we can have safety and we can deal with racist issues, that we can take care of our environment, that we can take care of our workers, and that we can hold people accountable when they do wrong, regardless whether there is somebody in the streets or a police officer, I am the person that you want to vote for. Remember that crime is not up. There are certain parts of our county that have some crimes have gone up. But for instance, if you live in the city of LA, LA has had a reduction from crime for the last 2 years. At the end of the day, district attorneys have a very, very minor role in the crime trends overall. But what we do have a role, we have a role in how we hold people accountable, how we hold ourselves accountable. And I believe that if you look at that as a metric, I would be the person that you want to reelect, and I would be eternally grateful for your support.
Thank you very much. And viewers, please follow us for more. Follow us. Leave a comment right here. We're having a discussion, or had a discussion with Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gaston. George, we have a saying on Tacos and Law: "Be trucha with your legal lucha. Be trucha with your electoral lucha." Adios.
I will. Gracias.
Thank
Adios.
you very much.